And I direct the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute, better known as the SCI Institute here in Utah. One of the things that is a hallmark of the SCI Institute is collaboration. We are well known for creating teams of collaborative researchers to be able to solve important problems where one individual discipline cannot solve by itself. And we found by teaming together the best people in the world into different disciplines that we're able to solve these larger, more complex problems. And so we've put together a couple of sets of panels as illustrations of some of this multidisciplinary work in solving these real-world problems. The first is a team that will talk about image analysis of MRI for patients with atrial fibrillation. We have Dr. Rob MacLeod, who's the Associate Director of the SCI Institute. He is also the Associate Director of the Cardiovascular Research and Training Institute, the Associate Director of CARMA, which is a cardiology center, and a Professor of Bioengineering. Nassir Marrouche, Dr. Marrouche is the Director of CARMA and a cardiologist specializing in atrial fibrillation, and Josh Blauer, who is a PhD student, to talk about kind of how this all works together. So Rob.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, everyone. As Chris said, we're going to have sort of two pieces to the panel. I'll start off, the three of us will start off and give you some slides to give you a little bit of background. And then we'll have a second group headed by Valerio also present some of their background material. And then we'll try and leave as much time at the end for questions and discussion, interaction, which we definitely want to encourage. The slide I had up before, of course, was to put you in the mood because winter's almost here and we're all happy to be here to go skiing. But I first want to talk as just a bit of introduction of what we do, the three of us do, and what our roles are. Nassir Marrouche is a physician. He'll be explaining some of the clinical background, the medical background for this project, and explaining how his interactions with SCI have changed his clinical practice. And that's really what we set out to achieve with interactions like this. And I think it's a great success story. And then Josh will fill in with the student perspective. What's it like to be a grad student with too many bosses? Right? Up and down the campus, here at SCI to do things, up at the hospital to do things, over to the CARMA center to do things, over to the MRI scanner to do things, and how he dealt with that, and how, you know, at least a little bit of the progress he's made has been possible through that collaboration. And then I'll come back at the end and share some of the experiences that we've had in collaborating. You know, what is collaborating actually like? How does it feel to tie groups like this together? What are the key things we've learned over 4 or 5 years of experience doing that? And that hopefully will again spur some discussion. So like I say, it'll be set up essentially as three stories, and the first of the story is going to be the clinical experience. And I'll hand this over to Nassir to tell you a little bit about AFib and what it is we do.
Thank you, Rob. It's great to be here. One of the reasons why I am personally and the team, the clinical team joined the University of Utah is Rob MacLeod in this institution, and I want to show you why. I've been working on AFib research, atrial fibrillation, for 22 years now. 5 years ago, I joined the U to take advantage of this infrastructure we have here at SCI and UCare as well. So what atrial fibrillation as a disease that we're dealing with, as you can tell, this is an example that we like to show, a very well pumping heart that you can tell the MRI scan is a beautiful image of the normal pumping heart. And that atrium here, this chamber, will start fibrillating and cause us a lot of problems. Number one, risk of stroke. 30% embolic strokes in the world today is because of this disease. We have at least a third of these patients who go into heart failure and maybe sudden cardiac death. And we have around 7,000 people who die every year from this disease in America alone, costing us, we talk about this as we go forward. So, as you know, with all the innovation in medicine and as we're moving in treatment, is it cancer, is it cardiac diseases and so on, we are aging. We expected in only a couple of years from now to have around 8 million people with AFib. Today we have around 5 million people with this disease in America alone that we have to manage. So, and this has been the dilemma for us. That's why until today we're trying to figure out what the best solution for these patients to deal with them. And this is one of the major horrible complications of atrial fibrillation. One of our patients, unfortunately, before, this is a normal brain, as you can tell, and that this spot is a risk of stroke. It's costing us in America alone today around $20 billion to deal with this disease and the consequences of atrial fibrillation. So how about finding a good solution for this? And that's why the U, that's why the CARMA Center, and that's why the collaboration with SCI. One of the major things today when we see in a patient with atrial fibrillation, it's hard to believe that technology doesn't work at the SCI. Press, it doesn't go. It's not going on the next slide. It's better it goes. Good, thank you. So how we deal with this patient today? We give him drugs. For 22 years, we're trying to find the best drug for this. We invested multi-billion dollars on trying the right drug to treat, to suppress this arrhythmia. Unfortunately, only 50% of patients respond to medical treatment, staying in normal rhythm out of this arrhythmia for a short period of time. And every drug you use will fail within a year or two. One of the modalities have been initiated a while ago is called the ablation procedure, that's one of the reasons why we joined the U and we hired to start the center here at the U from Cleveland Clinic. And actually we ran away from Cleveland Clinic to work on improving this management protocol. So as you can tell here, we started doing this in Cleveland in 2001, before that in San Francisco. So what we are doing is putting catheters. This is the trick question I ask everybody in the audience: where's the heart in this image? Only I can tell because I've been here 4 times a day today, or 2 times in the morning. So this is the heart shadow. You see only one part of the heart, the left atrium, the chamber I showed in MRI. You see I have clean images. But what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to do an ablation, burn cells, kill cells to cure AFib. So this is before the procedures. Today there's 100,000 of these procedures done in America alone, and only this country. This is before the ablation. I'm trying to ablate with this catheter, and this is after. Next slide, please. It's not working anymore. And this is, you have to go back. This go back, please. Go back, please. Sorry. So this is before, and this is after. And as you can tell, I can't tell what's the difference. This is everybody in the world today trying to use to manage this patient. There's no difference between pre and post. We look at fluoroscopy image like this to manage our patient. We look at indicators of irregular heartbeats, which is indirectly correlated to what happened in the tissue. And that's why I went to Rob when I came here, and the UCare team said, help me understand. Let the image this team, please. Come and help me. And within, honestly, wasn't a week. We responded within 24 hours. I'm usually to be basically a week to respond. But within a week, we sat down together. That's a joke. He answers with 5 minutes. And we sat together, we came to this team, said, let's look at the tissue that we deal with in these patients. And there were, not only we could define, Rob is going to talk about this more, and Josh as well, modalities to treat these patients in a better way and look at the tissue and see it, but we came to this. Let me start with the next slide first. We came to this. And this is a major breakthrough. I think the future will show, but this is a major breakthrough in medical treatment of arrhythmias and cardiac diseases. So we tell the world today, and this is being adopted there as we speak in more than 50 centers worldwide, that we can use MRI to look at the tissue we're dealing with, instead of diagnosing patient based on the age, based on the hypertension or comorbidities. We're just looking at the disease, like any other diseases in medicine that we deal with. So this is the chamber that we treat called the left atrium, the upper chamber I showed you before, fibrillating. With the help of this key, with the help of Rob and his team at the CARMA Center, we could come up with a scoring system called the Utah classification for arrhythmia, for AFib. Should Brian Cummings help us initiate this back then as well? He's unfortunately at Ohio State now. So you can tell it's from this patient to this patient here, if you go back forward now, there's more green. So what green means for me as a clinician is this patient has more disease than this patient. Unfortunately, I can't treat this patient well. Moreover, these patients here, that's a huge finding just recently published in the world, have a high risk of stroke. So now, if I look at these hearts, I can tell my patients today in the clinic when I see them, you guys, because of this imaging process here, can I tell you have a high risk of stroke, while this patient can be cured early on in their disease stage. Unfortunately, today, all these patients present, this could be a young patient, this could be a patient with any other comorbidities. This is called a personalized way of managing the arrhythmia, because we look at the tissue that we treat based on the findings we could research here. And this is the software that we developed with the team called the CARMA software. We can analyze how much damage we put in the heart when we deliver energy. Instead of looking at fluoroscopies, which doesn't tell us anything, it can exactly tell us what we did in the heart after treatment delivery with radio frequency, and so on. Rob is going to talk about this some more. And again, this is where the software comes to life. This is, you can tell this is Rob MacLeod's slides of interaction and excitement, imaging, and so on. Anyway, so this is the core view. This is what we use every day. We use it around 15 patients a day at the EU to manage arrhythmia. So we see around between 60 to 80 patients a week. And this is a research started only 5 years ago. Within a year, became a clinical entity. Now, as we speak, probably there's maybe thousands of patients around the world are treated. And hopefully within a year, we'll be in the guidelines changing the way arrhythmia are treated because of work is done here, collaborative efforts with these guys. And moreover, I showed you before that when we deliver treatment, we need to know what happens with the heart. I waited 10 years to see this happen. It's like a dream come true for me. Imagine you put the catheter, you burn the heart, you have no idea when you leave. And this is a lot of people who walk through this, have no idea what's happening to patients' heart. Hundreds of thousands of patients, 100,000 alone in America. We in Utah, before you leave the hospital, our cath lab, we exactly tell you where we did the lesions to cure arrhythmia, how specific they are, how accurate they are, because we have a special delivery places to deliver lesions. Great guiding tool to deliver treatments. Obviously, this helped us clinically a lot. This whole innovation happened over years. This is our quarters number of volumes of patients that we treat in Utah. The AFib clinic we call part of the CARMA Center. You see the expansion development here, the ablation procedures. This is per week. You see 25 to 30 per week. We're competing with major centers in the world. This is the Cleveland clinic where I came from. But this red should be right here within hopefully a couple of months, not years. So we're leaders in this treatment because of this innovation that started at this center working Dr. CARMA. This is the patients that we see that come to see us when I came to the EU in 2006. And this is their referral basis today. They come to see us. I put this for MacLeod and my wife, they're Canadian, so but this is how we impacting the world of medicine with innovation happened here at SCI. And this is an example we're trying to promote. How can innovation in imaging and science bring this to the next level within a short period of time? Collaboration, open doors to a physician like me and others. I think now I want to give it to the student experience. Josh.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Josh Blauer, and as Rob mentioned, I'm a bioengineering student. I'm working with Nassir and Rob as my advisors. And today I hope to give the student perspective and show how working with the SCI Institute and working with CARMA Center has facilitated our science and our interactions. So, again, for this presentation, I was given one simple rule. This came from Chris Johnson, and he said, if they have a background in theoretical physics, it's okay to show them equations. So just by raising hands real quick, do we have any theoretical physicists in the room? All right, so I'm breaking that rule. I'll try to keep it simple, though. So first off, I want to present the governing laws of academia and conservation of tenure track. That is, papers equal money. More important for me personally is the governing law of graduation. That papers equal graduation. And I mean, this is a joke, but papers are really symbolic and important in that they are the currency, or they are the evidence of a successful collaboration. And so what I want to do is I want to march through a paper that I had the privilege to participate in that illustrates the effectiveness of the collaboration that the CARMA Center and SCI have had, and what we can do moving forward in that arena. So for this paper, well, Nassir kind of mentioned that we look at these MRIs, and we're interested in where we see abnormalities. So you can see some bright areas. This is the left atrium. Here's the blood. Here's some tissue. And those enhanced areas, this is actually taken from a patient 3 months after Nassir performed an ablation. And so they have scarring from his ablation like he talked about. And this is great to see what happened. The problem is this is 3 months after the procedure. And so, you know, if the patient has a recurrence, maybe it can help us figure out what to do next. But really it doesn't help them after that first ablation to know what we need to do. So because of the facilities we decided, well, let's start scanning these patients immediately after ablation. Let's see what's different. Let's see if it can tell us what's going to be scarred, what the outcome is going to be down the road. And so we did that, and we put a patient in immediately after Nassir performed an ablation, and we saw some differences. In this tissue right here, this is the posterior wall of the left atrium. You see these dark areas that we hadn't seen previously in patients. And it was Chris McGann, who was the first author on this paper, who first noticed this and started thinking about, well, what could those dark regions be? And does it tell us anything about what's going to happen here? These are actually scanned. This is a scan of the same patient. And because these dark areas are right here on the posterior wall where we see this scarring, we thought, well, maybe this is an indication that those dark areas are important to what's going to eventually scar. So Chris McGann comes to me, he says, I need a bioengineer, I need someone who can quantitatively assess what this means and compare these images. And fortunately, I have access and I have involvement with the SCI Institute here, so I've been able to use the tools and the expertise to help come up with a pipeline like this that helped facilitated our analysis of what those dark regions meant. So here's the pipeline. And we'll plug into the pipeline that immediately post-ablation image and that 3-month post-ablation image. And from there, we're going to move to what we call segmentation. Now, segmentation is simply extracting the salient information from the images that allow us to do our analysis. And so what we have here is a screenshot of some software developed here at SCI called SEG3D. And what we can do is we can come in, and here in yellow, we can highlight the regions that we can highlight the chamber, the blood volume, essentially. So we know what the anatomy looks like. And then we can highlight the different tissue types that we see, the dark regions or the bright regions, and we can characterize those tissues. One shameless plug, this is the old version of SEG3D. Here's a new version, better workflows, better updated look. All of this software I'll mention is available as public license. So once we have this segmentation, we define those important regions. The next thing we do is we build a model. Again, I'm relying on some SCI software called SCIrun. And this takes that segmentation and it creates a geometry that represents those regions of interest. And so I start out and I create a left atrium. And then I bring in those different tissue types, red being the dark areas, green being the bright areas, and making a simple extension to SCIrun, I was able to map those regions onto this surface. And so now I've got a somewhat intuitive and a simple representation, visualization of where these regions are and how extensive they are. So now that we have our model, so I did this for both the immediately post and 3-month post-ablation scans, I can go on to one more problem that we have. It's called registration. For those of you who may not be familiar, it's just lining up data. So we scan these patients at 2 different times, and to compare them, we need to line them up. And because it's the same patient, it's similar. I mean, their left atrium doesn't change that much from pre to post, or from immediately post-ablation to 3 months post-ablation. But based on a number of factors, it is a little bit different. But we want to get the best comparison possible of those surfaces that we can. And so to do that, I went to some experts here at the SCI Institute that have specialize in these things, specifically Marcel Stella and the group he works with. And we implemented their deformable surface registration software that allowed us to match this blue surface to this red surface in this representation as you see below. So this gave us the best possible matching of this data. So finally, we were able to do a comparison and come out with a clinical finding that the dark areas that you see here contribute most to the scar formation at 3 months. And so this is important clinically, so we know we have a marker to look for immediately following ablation to know where that scar is going to form and how extensive it will be. Additionally, in a general sense, this shows the effectiveness of a collaboration between two institutes that have specialty in different areas and how that can come together and affect the clinical outcomes for patients. Moving forward, we hope to implement this so that all these patients receiving scans immediately following ablation, we can either intervene at that point, we can give that information to Nassir, and he can go and intervene so that he can achieve the targets that he has going into an ablation, or we can at least know immediately after that we're going to have to be monitoring this patient because they stand a risk of recurrence, so that we don't have any people coming out and getting more strokes or anything of that nature. So I think this is hopefully an illustrative example of the benefit that can be derived from collaborating with SCI and the experts here. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, John. And we might give him his degree eventually. And they're this good, we hate to let them go. All right, I'm going to pick up with just the last few slides here on what I will call the collaborative experience, and sort of a summation of some of the things that I've discovered, and to put in a little bit of context, a bit of history of how the SCI Institute actually began. Chris and I came together over 20 years ago in a place called the CVRTI, or Cardiovascular Research and Training Institute, and we noticed right away that between the upper campus, where the hospital sits, and the CVRTI sit, and the lower campus, there was a decided climate shift. There was a difference between the upper and lower campus, and yet we saw a way there was to bridge that difference from the CVRTI, using our bicycles, and eventually using computing to come down to the lower campus, tie into engineering expertise, and ultimately create the institute that you're in right now, the SCI Institute. And that history has really continued, because when Nassir came and we started looking around to solve the problems he had for us, we recognized that CVRTI has a great expertise in cardiac electrophysiology and the basic science behind atrial arrhythmias. The SCI Institute has this amazing expertise. We had to bring in some other partners, and one of them was UCARE. Nassir mentioned this group. This is the Utah Center for Advanced Imaging Research. These are the guys who make magic happen on the MRI scanners that we've just seen. And then, of course, we had the cardiologists, the final partners in this little game. And we all gathered together, and out of that, and a lot of bike riding around campus by me and Josh and others, out of that came CARMA. And so CARMA is another example of how we tie together expertise and interests around a common theme and really focus energy on that theme and make real progress. And so CARMA has evolved, just as SCI evolved before it, into a group of very interdisciplinary people. These are some of the imaging people over here, imaging expertise at UCARE, the medical folks in the middle, a lot of the engineers and image processing, image analysis people on the left. And that group has had a strong impact, as you've seen. A big part of what we do, a big part of the benefits of what we do, is we get to bring students into it. You saw Josh explain his story. These are examples of all students who've worked in the CARMA project in one form or another over the years. And they're graduate students and undergraduate students, all of them under the Department of Bioengineering, many of them involved in the biomedical engineering undergraduate program. So we have undergrad students who can participate in research at this level, tied to clinical progress, tied to advanced technology, and they get an incredible exposure to whatever it is they decide to do next. Some of them have gone to medical school, others have gone on to do research. So what have we learned from all that? Well, the first thing I learned when I started talking to engineers especially is I needed a way to explain how AFib worked. And so I went back to some old examples of how the heart works. So the arms here, the atrial chambers, the legs are the ventricles, and here you see an abnormal rhythm. The atrial is beating fairly normally, but not conducting to the ventricles every time. So this is an abnormal block. But this is the AFib. Here's the disease that we're really dealing with. And I think this is a great way to capture it for the engineer. So here are the atria. They're shaking uncontrollably, like you saw in the MRI. And every once in a while, a beat makes it through to the ventricles. And this is what you have to have in your mind as you start to deal with this disease and come up with solutions for the disease. So that's AFib. And once we get that translation straight and we get some images together and get the right people in the room, we've seen some terrific things come out of that. You've seen some examples of that. I won't go over them again right now. But now I want to come to sort of some of the things we've learned. And this is one of the first things we all learn. So those of us who are engineers and hang around with doctors, we start to think we're kind of doctors too. But it's really dangerous to be a doctor when you're really not. So the first thing that all of us had to learn is what not to do. And so when we get asked questions about medical things, we point everybody to our clinical colleagues. But what we also learned is you have to find doctors and have them work with you. And sometimes they show up in strange packages in strange places. And you have to kind of go with them wherever they are, find them where they are, and bring them together and start talking to them and develop a close relationship with them and visit them on their turf, whether that's the hospital or the ski hill. We also learned, and this should be obvious, we have to make good tools. And you've seen examples of those good tools. Ski Run, SCIx3D, those are tools you've seen examples of. Nassir mentioned CoreView. CoreView is actually built on top of SCIx3D. SCIx3D is an open source product. CoreView is actually a product built inside of the Merrick spin-off entity within the CARMA Institute. That's a product based on the segmentation abilities, specifically directed at looking at the left atrial tissue. Biomesh3D is a meshing software that we can also use to make some of those models you saw. And so you have to make your tools, and you have to make them through that interaction with the physicians, and with constant iterations and constant discussion as to whether what you're producing is something they can actually use. You also have to involve industry at some point, and I say wisely and to some extent cautiously. You can have great experiences and terrible experiences, as with all things in life. We have partnered with a number of companies in a number of different aspects in the research and CARMA, and that again is a rich and valuable piece of the puzzle, and you have to learn to deal with that territory. That was probably one of the biggest culture shifts for me. It was pretty straightforward to deal with physicians actually compared to dealing with business people. So we're still in that learning curve, I have to say. And then finally, when you get all these people together, you have to bring them together, and you have to meet and interact with them on whatever terms and whatever territory that happens to be, whether it's at a conference or at a ski hill. And out of that, hopefully will come a vision for how we can bring technology and medicine and eventually industry into this whole story and develop a future that looks like this, where a patient shows up with an abnormal ECG, as we're discovering now in the outreach clinics that CARMA is also instituting. They come to visit us here or another center in the world, and they get an MRI scan. And out of that MRI scan, they get a fibrosis evaluation, as you've just seen Nassir describe. But now, out of that fibrosis, not only are treatment options discussed and treatment is carried out, but we start to make models. We start to create patient-specific models of the atria of those patients. Maybe we collect even some more electrocardiographic data from those patients. Use some of the technologies we've also developed at SCI to eventually allow simulation of the atrial electrical activity. And with that simulation tool, allow the physician to actually plan the ablation, the one you heard about. We helped Nassir evaluate the ablation. He knows now where he's burned. But wouldn't it be incredible if you could sit down before a case and actually try out some burning strategies, try out some ablation strategies, and actually evaluate their effectiveness before going in. And then, of course, carry out the follow-up and follow-up on the patient and evaluate success of the patient. And that'd be part of great things like this. A woman who came to the CARMA clinic and was treated successfully by Nassir and has been able to say ciao to her AFib as she pursues her dreams of hiking through Europe, something she could never imagine doing before she had treatment for her AFib. So we've had amazing impact already here in Utah through this collaboration, but we have a big, big vision for the future and where we think we can go with bringing even more of this technology into the process. Last thing I have to finish with, it just seems topical right now, is a statement from Steve Jobs, of course, who unfortunately left us recently. And he said a wonderful thing that motivates a lot of what I think drives us. He said, the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. And I think that love for what we're doing, that love for developing these solutions, these interdisciplinary approaches, is really what's driven us to achieve the kind of success that we're able to at least briefly describe to you today. And that motivation is very real and very genuine and permeates all of what we do. Now, to hear more of this, obviously you can go to lots of websites, but because you're here today in today's SCIx, you can actually go upstairs to the 4th floor and see our posters and talk with a bunch of the other students working on both this project and other related projects to, again, this marriage of technology and medicine to bring forward both our discovery and our treatment of patients. So that's the end of my little spiel, and I'll pass over to Valeria now.
Let me give you a quick introduction to our next group. So the next group is working on problems in fundamental science, and we have a team of Professor Valeria Pascucci, who's a professor of computer science and a faculty member within the SCI Institute. We have Peer-Timo Bremer, who's a project leader at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, and we have Harsh Bhatia, who's a graduate student, PhD student in computer science, and they're going to tell you about some of the computer science and technologies they've been able to create to solve problems in science. So, Valerio.
Thank you for the introduction. We'll talk about from our different perspective of how we're evolving the work in our group. Harsh is a graduate student here, and I was trying to put the people in order of how much work they do, and I already give a first perspective. So what I think is interesting in the area that we're doing, in some sense, we're probably much less focused. We're really into creating technology that can apply for a variety of applications. And so then we have a kind of a different cycle of how we go from building technology and finding motivation for its practical use. So those are just a few examples of things that we have been looking at, and they really range from doing visualization analysis for climate modeling applications to actually analyzing porous media. Those things that you see here is actually turbulent mixing that happens in the explosion of supernova. So really application areas that are very different from each other. And what we really love and find very interesting is to see what are the commonalities in terms of the way you process the data, manage the data, find interesting features and so on, so that you can build an infrastructure that actually can help all of those things with minor variations, if you will. And that's really our kind of computer science perspective applied to various science applications. Our focus is really in dealing with large data. This is something that is a big problem today that is getting worse and worse, if you will, or from our perspective, it's kind of job security, because people will need more and more our type of technology. The sources of data are of a fairly wide variety of types. In places like Lawrence Livermore and other national laboratories, we have these massive supercomputers that are building and that are larger and larger over time, and they're producing amounts of data that are really were even hard to think about a few years ago, and now they generate in daily basis. And scientists have always a huge challenge into, well, you generate all this bunch of numbers, how do I make sense out of them, right? And some of those can be, as we were seeing, say, the combustion simulations and how I define the design a new fuel that could be more efficient in a combustion process and help in the better energy production. Some could be, how do the various hypotheses of how the human activity evolve over time, how those are going to impact climate. But some are different, like when you do acquisition of many images, there is the whole area of digital photography. People are doing acquisition of many, many more things at the same time, and how you merge them together into something seamless. And actually, in the demo upstairs, we have various examples of these various applications. And so challenges range from managing the data, delivering the data remotely. People used to do things only locally now. It's well known people store the data in a large server somewhere, and you are in a different location, you have to access the data very quickly. So we all got used to web apps access and so on, but when you start dealing, especially with imaging data and other variety of data, the amount of data gets huge, and you have to have special infrastructure that actually help access the data and solve those problems. So another side of our activity is more into how do I extract features that help scientists make sense out of this data. So in examples like this, we actually turn the raw imaging data into fine scale structure that express how resistance is a material to particular stress, so that they can design, in particular here, to were target for fusion that they're doing with a large experiments in Livermore using laser into particular targets. They have some porous material of this type, and actually has as they were describing before, a lot of this is driven by doing a simulation first, try all the alternatives, understand what are the consequences of those design decisions, and build the science so that they actually can do directly kind of the right thing. And this is why those data sets are getting so massive and so on. Other applications are related, like extracting oil and then going back and doing carbon sequestration in the substrate, underground, and see how that could be done in a safe manner, and understand how that can evolve over a long period of time. So overall, in the years, one question that arises: how can we kind of achieve this broad spectrum of application, build the technology, and kind of sustain this type of work over the years? And it's hard to come up with recipes, but we have been trying to look at, initially you try things and do what instinctively seems right, but then you try to build a process to actually make this happen more systematically. So one important aspect is actually having this continuous flow between the basic, more theoretical research that might seem kind of abstract, to actually build tools that are not just kind of the prototype that you deploy very often to publish a paper and then you move on to the next fun problem, but really stick around and work with the users and make sure that they really actually take the tools and use them in practice and solve real problems with them. That's actually typically a challenge between the academic environment and national laboratories, industry, and so on, that there is a gap really just how people are willing to stick with the problems and carry it all the way through. The other, of course, is you have to sustain the work and pay the people that are involved, and it's hard to build like sustained teams of people that don't have too much turnover, because you feel a lot of expertise. And so the challenge has been in taking maintaining long-term collaboration and having funding that are very heterogeneous, if you will, but you kind of maintain a vision that is unified. So we have been funding from NSF, DOE, DOD, and so on, a variety of agencies, which, by the way, we're very thankful for their support. But at the same time, we have been working with many different national laboratories. And you see that actually those are basically, I would say, all the bigger one in the nation. And I worked in the past, before coming here, to SCI Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. I actually now have a joint position with Pacific Northwest, where I'm a fellow of the laboratory. And Timo, that is going to speak later, has a joint appointment between Livermore and here. So we're really into creating an infrastructure where the people are really involved on many sides and work together. We have students that have been basically visiting, even just last summer, almost all those laboratories. And now they're back, they made experience there, they bring the problem, they gave them our expertise and maintain an involvement. And also we're working with the industry. So those that have different requirements, different way of looking at long-term and short-term challenges. And I find that having those different collaborations help us understand those different perspectives. Just recently, we're working with people at VisualShare that are looking at how our distribution of large images and how they could be integrated in their system, but they already have a software that is commercially available. There's a company, Simplify, that does compression that could complement our technology and make their stuff more useful in our stuff as well. In digital photography, we're working with this company called Color that actually does the best software called Autopano for stitching large images. They saw a presentation from Brian, one of my students, at the last CIGR conference, and they asked, can we license your technology, how we can integrate? And actually, Brian can show you later data that they gave us. Normally, actually, they don't distribute data, but they're really engaged. Plus, there are other collaboration with industry, but they don't always want to be advertised. So overall, the issue is really how to build tools that you have to stay kind of focused on the technical front, but really have a wide type of engagement on the application side. And for us, really, the technical focus is having this high-performance tool for accessing and processing data very quickly, and the other is actually make sure that the scientists that access the data can rely on the information. So this notion of having error bounds and so on, they at the end of the day tell whether the information they access is really reliable. Even the decision maker and so on has to know when you see a picture, is that deceiving or not. We're trying to be extremely careful to make nice pictures when it's needed, but really have informative visualization and analysis. And so typically what they say, extract features, and those can be neurons in a brain or an extinction region in combustion simulation. And can we do that in a unified way? In our case, we use topology to do those things, but there might be other techniques, and we're trying to learn more and so on. But practically, is really we're looking at kind of the extreme side of the spectrum, and that's where I think our group is probably more unique and special in the sense that a lot of the techniques really go all the way to theoretical mathematics that often is thought of as not really useful, but at the same time we collaborate with scientists that do those simulations or do physical experiments, and finding the link between those worlds and make sure that the transfer of technology between the two happens faster is really one main focus. Of course, you need lots of people to do things. This is really, actually, this is, by now it's updated. There are more and more people. An easier way to show this is actually, they are also spread around the world, and there are actually a few places to add here. We have some new collaboration in France. I don't think I have yet the pin on the PNL location and so on, but generally, people work with us, leave, and they take a position in a different institution. Can we maintain the flow of information instead of always moving on? What we're, just to conclude, what we're doing now, and is actually already now approved from the University of Utah, and we have specifically a strategic partnership with PNL, and we're extended to our national laboratory. We're building a center on this focused technical area of dealing with massive data. And we actually specifically use the generic term extreme data because really it depends on what you're doing and what infrastructure you have available, what large data means. So if I have a terabyte of data on an iPhone, that's a lot of data, it doesn't fit. But if I'm on big supercomputers, then we're talking about petabytes of data or exabytes of data. That's actually the project that we're already involved. And to have kind of trying to bring together these different souls of doing the fundamental research, which is a lot of fun, but can easily disappear just in publications and no real impact on society, and instead work with the national laboratories and industry to turn this into deployment of real tools that people can use in practice. And on the other end of the spectrum, in the process, educate the next generation of people, experts in the field, that can actually bring this out and make it really an impact in the society. And that people like Parsh, who will speak at the end, will give a perspective of can we successfully turn this environment into making more effective for their education and their growth as new scientists. So I'll turn it over to Timo for his perspective.
All right, so one thing that Blauer already mentioned is that one of the big advantages that we're trying to take advantage of here is this tight collaboration between industry that typically people describe like places like Lawrence Livermore's industry, more like the research lab, and the academics, where a lot of times both sides do good work, but because both sides are kind of separate from each other, it's very hard to take advantage of what both sides do. And just to give you an idea, so I work at CAS, the Center for Applied Scientific Computing. That's kind of like the computer science, applied math, research branch of Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And they're doing great work. And just to give you an idea, so I'm involved in like uncertainty quantification of climate simulation, or and then the analysis of those large simulations that you saw. But in general, the lab, they always describe it as mission-driven research. So the labs do a broad base of research, but at some level they're still constrained to, they have a certain mission. They have some of the labs are biology-driven. Livermore has still a large weapons program and has a large laser program now within the facility. And they do kind of like to maintain their research in kind of that direction. Fundamental research, but that is driven by their particular objectives, because that's really where they get their money from. And at the end of the day, somebody has to go to Congress and say, okay, we built this new fusion laser with our technology, and they really don't care whether you have like the next fundamental math problem solved, unless you can really like make that work for the laser. And so the problem in that is that sometimes that makes it difficult for us, if we work in isolation, to actually make the next fundamental leap in technology, because we're stuck with kind of what we have, and we can improve upon that for a particular application. But if we need something completely new, it's difficult to do that in a pure national laboratory environment, because that's not what we're set up for. And one of the great things in this collaboration that's been going on for a long time is that here we have this tight integration where we can work with academia on the sides with new students and new PhD projects to get the fundamental basic research working on the side, but then at the same time we are still directly connected to the applications, to the application scientists, so we know where we want to go. So as soon as we have made that new theoretical step forward, we can actually immediately apply it, and we don't stop at that one paper and the one picture in the paper, but we can go back and say, okay, now let's actually look at the real application. And then also that comes back again, because then applying those theoretical research to those applications brings you a completely new perspective and gives you new ideas that otherwise are hard to do if you just want that one paper. So just to walk you through one of those things, and that's actually kind of my career path here. So when Moderator was at Lawrence Livermore, I started my PhD studies at the University of Davis in California. And so we started to work on the theoretical concept of how do we do topology on piecewise linear functions. And it seemed kind of abstract. We kind of knew that it would be really useful if you could do something like this. So here you see the topology of some terrain. But a lot of people, even in our own field, were like, I mean, this is kind of a solve, and we're not really that interested. I mean, why do you do this stuff? But so we worked for like at least 2 years to get something working. And all of a sudden we were kind of done, and then at the lab, at the same time, they were running these Rayleigh-Taylor instabilities. So this is a mixing problem. You have the heavy fluid and the light fluid. You essentially start gravity. The heavy fluid is going to sink. The light fluid is going to go up. You get these characteristic structures. And it's a very fundamental physics problem. It happens in supernovae and mixing. And they were running what they were calling hero simulations. So the largest simulations today were run with the Miranda code to kind of simulate these processes. And they were coming to Blauer and to us, and we're like, well, we would like to understand how this thing behaves. And we realized, hey, wait, if we treat this in the right way, we can actually use the topology tools that by now were really well developed, and we had error bounds, and we had stable algorithms. We said, oh, look, we can actually describe these structures that they were interested in, these bubbles. So they were interested in how can we count these different bubbles in the different staging of the mixing process? How many are there? How do they merge? How do they split? That was really the fundamental question. The problem is they had no way of mathematically expressing what a bubble was. They could look at it and say, like, that thing, that's a bubble. But we're like, well, I can extract back. I mean, you have to give me something more. Then, well, we don't know. So it turns out that the topological concept that initially seemed kind of esoteric in some sense were really, really useful. And we had all the tools ready so we could actually do that analysis. And that was very successful. They gave us the best application paper award for it. And so that worked out really well. But then it didn't even stop there. So then we could take that. And by that time, I had moved on and become a postdoc. But then there were extensions to 3D. And again, we did the same cycle over again. So again, that was kind of esoteric. So now we have to extend it to 3D. We have to get new algorithms. But we get a new student on board, Atrial, who's upstairs, who's going to kind of give you a demo of the software, who then again worked on his PhD on a theoretical background. And just as before, by the time we kind of had the tools ready, it was actually fairly obvious to find really good applications. So in this case, That was the analysis of the porous media that Blauer talked about. So these people were trying to extract like core lines of these tiny porous metals to analyze them. And once again, it turned out that some of these seemingly mathematical, theoretical concepts were highly useful in practice, where we could just say, oh, look, these structures, in this case, they're called stable one manifolds, that's really what you're looking at. And I don't have to point at it. I could make a mathematical definition and say, this is the mathematical structure you're interested in. We explain that to the scientists and say, oh yeah, no, that's exactly what we want. And then we have the tools ready and can actually do an analysis with it. So this continuous cycle, that's actually what makes this collaboration so successful. The fact that we are able to constantly work on the new next step in theory, but then also immediately can connect it to the practical applications and then really make it work, and that gives us the next idea how to go forward. And then it's also intimately connected with the flow of people. And this is kind of just like a short overview of the people that we actually had involved. So people that started out as grad students working with us on some theory, got internships, even fellowships at Livermore. So Atrial, so I did a graduate student at UC, got an internship at the lab, got a fellowship at the lab, ended up doing a postdoc in collaboration with the lab, and now am a full-time scientist working with SCI with a shared appointment at SCI. Atrial has more or less the same career. Started as a grad student, became a fellow at the lab, had a fellowship there, went to a postdoc actually at Utah, and is now a full-time researcher. And we have many people, not just with Livermore, there are people now working at Sandia, California that came out of our group that are still heavily collaborating. And because we have this big group, we can create this diverse multi-institutional team that all kind of works together and collaborate to make this work. And now all the people on the right, that's essentially the current generation of student led by Harsh, who's now like on the same path. Has a graduate student here, is doing internship, just got accepted into the fellowship at Livermore, and you continue from there. So that's really what makes this collaboration work, and that's been highly successful in the past. So, Harsh.
Thanks, Timo. So I spent a couple of summer internships at Livermore, and I'll be talking about my experiences as a grad student in a collaborative environment. So one of the things that we as grad students, one of the most important learnings for us is to understand the real-world applications, the real-world meaning of the research we are doing. Given some data of a certain kind, it's important that we understand what the data is, its form, the physical processes that the data represents, and the experiments or simulations that generate the data. So working at Livermore has helped me understand, really understand that. Well, most of the times we graduate students are more concerned with getting our research right, the technical details to debug our codes, get the proofs right, understanding the basic theory. We sometimes forget about the bigger picture. We sometimes care less about the bigger impact that our research has, and are more concerned about the technical details of the work. For a long time, I think my thought process was limited to the data I was working with and the experiments I was trying to run. For example, this flow field we were trying to understand. It was only after quite a few discussions with my advisor, my mentors, and postdocs that I finally began to appreciate the bigger problem that we are trying to solve, to understand the efficiency of a combustion engine, which is represented by this flow field, so that we can lower the emission levels. So, as I mentioned, the Livermore collaboration and my internships at Livermore has given me a better insight of the real-world applications. Interactions with scientists has helped me a lot to gain perspective. I once gave a talk here at SCI, and at a later date I gave a similar talk at the lab. And I was really impressed by the variation in the type of audience I got there. There were people doing actually doing fluid simulations, and they asked me questions which were completely completely different from what I would get here. I think some of the things I'd never thought of, and this really helped open me my thought process. My internships in Livermore has given me a taste of industry work culture, and it has helped. I'm sorry. It has helped me grow my professional networking. I got in touch with I got in touch with other student interns, some of the very bright minds of the country. I got chance to discuss and meet with senior members of my team, and that really helped increase my motivation and led to some new ideas. Some of the career opportunities and that I've got, I spent 2 summer internships in Livermore, and last week I was accepted in the Livermore Scholar Program, which is actually a fellowship for 4 years for graduate students. And so 2 of the most important requirements of the scholarship was that there should be a strong collaboration between my university advisor and my mentor at the lab. And the second was that my proposed research should be very much related to the lab's mission, the areas where the lab is interested in. And I think both of these factors really helped my application. And I think this collaboration with Livermore National Lab has helped me grow as a graduate student and has certainly opened up new career paths for me. That's it. Thank you.
All right, well, let's thank all the panelists. Thanks, guys. I'd like to open things up for some questions if people have for any of the panelists. Questions from people? That'd be at least one question.
I have a question for Nassir on the variability you see on your outcomes for the different types of methodologies that can be used for ablation. Have you seen different variabilities in different ablation techniques?
That's an excellent question. We're not going to do it out of high state, but this is very complicated. No, we did actually. This is what the study we're doing right now worldwide in 16 centers, 6 in Europe, and actually 7 in Europe and 9 in the United States, is looking at the different types of ablation and the outcome review classification. And I can tell you we already have a 600 patient database, a third of this from Coburg, Germany, and the outcome seems to be consistent. And more important, the data we need to share with you, as we already hear about it soon, is the drug treatment. Right? This is as important because there's still 5 million people in America today. We are maybe 100,000 people only, unfortunately, because people think they are appointment no return. So when we're changing the concept of managing this disease, then look before you treat. Don't treat people based on their age or comorbidities. Just look at the tissue that you're treating, the green and the blue. And this will improve the outcome. But drugs are realizing that failing, and now we can watch the progress of treatment. Any drugs you give to any patient today, watching what the drug does to your heart. Some drugs does kill tissue. So we're realizing here in our data as well, in Utah and others. But yes, the disability is there. I think the team are on the road. I think today probably somebody somewhere in the world trying to implement the software. I know where they are. They're probably somebody's in Brazil.
Describe a perfect world for you. As you're operating, you would like to have a simulation of exactly what the effect is of the ablation, whatever it's called, and be able to predict how the scar is going to form, and be able to sort of simulate that and see it in real time.
That's unfortunately the other slide that we wanted to present. I wish we had time to present it. So yes, ideally I would like to see not the fluoroscopy image that I showed you. This is what they are today. Ideally I would like to see online what goes on in that tunnel. And we are close. We are doing every Wednesday in hospital. This is one of the impact of SCI and UCARE on the hospital university, that part of the collaboration of CARMA. They have us use our EPMI lab to close it every Wednesday for these guys who are 25 engineers sitting there and experimenting. So we see now what changes is happening as we go. They're close to figure it out.
Do you have good simulations of how the scar tissue forms? Reliable simulation?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Every exam. Do you have an example?
It's not really simulation.
You need simulation or real time?
Real time. I mean,
we have a real time.
We're talking about real time capture of the cheese and tissue using MRI. That we have progress in. The simulation piece is definitely a work in progress.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Question.
The point of the question is all of my experience, you want to shoot about 400 yards ahead of where you are, where the computing can think you can be. Because eventually you'll get there, and it's better to aim really high.
But this is a fantastic question if you're looking at, because you see the AFib patient, unfortunately, for the research group. It's very complex. I mean, the green people, you see people, a patient with 4 years old, which is for our patient population, this is very young. It is young, the 70 is young today. But you see young patients have so massive sky without knowing why, which is, we know that his disease progression is very advanced and can't do much for them. When you see somebody with 85 years old, you come to see us, which has been rejected somewhere else for validation, we run into software and say, oh, you don't have much disease. And we cure them, we go back in the slopes here in Utah. So it's a complex disease. You're not seeing fibrosis. It's the beginning of one process, is what I'm saying. Come back to your question is, yes, we need to understand what's going on with the disease, but there's different pathophysiology. Is it coronary artery disease, it's diabetes, it's hypertension, it's genetic. So this is where we're going deeper, even with the imaging. These guys are very important, it's a great meeting with that issue. But yes, we need to simulate disease. If we can understand the disease better, then we can start putting simulation in place. But unfortunately, until today,
on the other observation is, I think it's your job to sort of collect the data, and their job to figure out how to represent that data in the most meaningful way.
That's what the judge put together. That's why you have the access to the patient first line to collect the data.
I think Rob has a number of PhD students who are doing exactly what you're talking about, is creating these ever more complex and sophisticated simulation models to take that next step to get to where Nassir wants to be now, but in the near future, hopefully. Yeah.
The problem are fasting and simulation, really fascinating. 600 years.
You're talking about AFib. Is there also tachycardia, a similar program to study what to ablate and how do you take?
So tachycardia is really a hard-work fasting expression. But there's a, going back to probably 90, multiple tachycardia, 26 of them in the heart. AFib is represents 75% of everything existing. There's, yes, we implemented this to the ventricles, something called ventricular tachycardia or semi-cardiac. It's what these two guys are working actively with a huge team. With an annual ventricular work predicting, imagine the CETA classification can predict sudden cardiac. You know, about people who die based on tissue structure in the ventricle. So what we're trying to do, go deeper, and this is the data we're collecting for them now, is to not only the AFib, applying everything in the ventricle. This is raw, have 2 models in place in animal models, but now every patient at the University of Utah gets scanned. We don't use echocardiogram much, we use MRIs for every single patient. Because of this, and these guys get the data, now we have, I think, 1,600 patient database.
Is this just as paid for as part of the overhead at the University Hospital?
I know, we have to ask, payments we have to ask somebody else. I don't know. I just called Chris, hey, see, we need $1 million. We used to call our vets, now I'm not sure what we're doing. But I didn't say what we're doing. Ask for more money as well.
Nobody panel knows where
No, this is a year for every patient comes in, the insurance pays for MRI, so it's covered. But there's a lot of projects we have on the side, industry supported right now, with a huge amount.
Where grant money has to go.
Okay, so GE,
GE is not price.
The university has a contract with C very close to that, right? But the funding comes much more in. The university has given some support for scanning. But external grants are very general and external grants for something that covers a fairly expensive cost.
So let me give you an example. The CARMA Center, when it started, we came up with a budget of $40,000 when it came complete. Today we have a budget of $4.9 million a year within 4 years period because of this clinical success. Very exciting in the industry. And unfortunately now it's only 20% NIH, maybe 50% Vice President's office, and the rest is Johnson.
All right, any other questions for the panel? Well, let's thank them all again. Thank you guys for to get the opportunity to see more of what's going on with both the panelists and others. We also have a lunch out there, so if you haven't had lunch yet, please join us for lunch.